Chapter 5: War, Legacy, and the Bank for All. In 1932, A.P. Giannini returned to his desk at 1 Powell Street, revitalizing the Bank of America amid financial turmoil. His Back to Good Times campaign restored public confidence, increasing deposits by $50 million. Despite regulatory challenges and powerful adversaries, his leadership ensured survival and growth. By the end of the 1930s, Bank of America had become one of the most prosperous banks in America. Then the world plunged into war. Bank of America set aside its rivalry and joined forces with fellow bankers, including Jack Morgan. Together, the banking industry provided all the financing needed to turn America into the most powerful war machine in history. By 1945, Bank of America was the largest commercial bank in the world. Giannini was truly the ideal banker. The banking industry is all about confidence, and his key to success was his ability to inspire it in people. Seeing his vision accomplished, Giannini finally retired and donated half of his fortune to education and research. In the spring of 1949, Amedeo Giannini died in his sleep from heart failure at age 79. His funeral took place at St. Mary's Cathedral in San Francisco. More than 2,500 people filled the cathedral. Thousands more lined the streets outside. In keeping with his wishes, all Bank of America branches around the world remained open all day, serving people. Despite creating the largest private bank in the world, with over $6 billion in assets and 517 branches, Giannini lived modestly. At the time of his death, his personal estate was valued at just $489,278. He had truly built a bank for the common people and stood by that ideal until the very end. Chapter 6: Boom, Bust, and the Battle for Survival. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the U.S. economy experienced robust growth. Post-World War II prosperity continued. Consumer demand was high, unemployment was low. California's economy boomed, becoming a powerhouse driven by diverse sectors. After Giannini's passing, Bank of America needed new leadership. The new CEO was S. Clark Bies, shy but a banker's banker. He knew the business from A to Z, ran the bank by delegating, made good appointments, and got growth going again. In 1959, Bank of America launched the Bank of America card, bringing credit cards to 2 million California families. It was groundbreaking, giving ordinary customers easy access to credit, enabling cash-free purchases, boosting consumer spending, and stimulating economic growth. By 1961, deposits reached over $12 billion in assets. But good times don't last forever. As the 1970s dawned, America was thrown into chaos. Anti-establishment sentiment fueled by the Vietnam War and economic disillusionment led to protests, some violent. A Bank of America branch near UC Berkeley was badly damaged by arson. The new leader, Tom Clausen, faced immense pressure. Bank of America had become a giant bureaucratic organization, a common phenomenon when companies grow too large. Competitors saw an opening. The biggest threat came from a much older bank, Citibank. Walter Wriston, Citibank's visionary president, came from a prestigious background. He was a risk-taker because his family and network would always be his safety net. He saw the potential of the first ATM rolled out by Chemical Bank in 1969. Citibank gambled $50 million on electronic tellers and won. Over the next year, Citibank built the largest electronic funds transfer system in the nation. Eventually, Bank of America implemented ATMs, but it was too late. Citibank surpassed Bank of America as the top commercial bank in the United States. Clausen had one last trick. legal but aggressive accounting measures to present earnings more favorably. He marked long-held assets up to market value to show higher earnings for 1980, allowing him to retire gracefully while handing hidden troubles to his successor.